Good afternoon or good morning, and welcome to yet another round of Strategic Talk series. My name is Mats Engman, and I work at ISTP as their military expert. Today, we will discuss the ever-present issue of engaging North Korea, or maybe more correctly, to re-engage North Korea. Because since the 2018 Kim-Trump summits, the security and political landscape on the Korean peninsula and in the region have significantly shifted. Pyongyang's strategic position has strengthened, not least through deeper economic, technological, and military ties with Russia. In Seoul, President Lee is making efforts to restart dialogue, and President Trump has declared a willingness to meet Kim Jong-un. And from Pyongyang, we hear DPRK leaders framing denuclearization as non-negotiable, but still an openness for meeting, especially President Trump. So the overall question is re-engagement and dialogue positions possible, and what could potentially be the outcome of such engagements? To help us unpack this and add many other aspects, I'm deeply honored to welcome two true experts to discuss this. Professor Nobukatsu Kanehara from the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and Professor Park Won-Gon from the Ewha Womans University in Seoul. These strategic talks are designed to further promote dialogue and exchange of views related to the developments on the Korean Peninsula, and to further increase the understanding of the many factors and policies that impact political and security developments. The talks are recorded and published. We try to do 2 or 3 talks covering the same issue, but with different experts allowing different perspectives. The day before yesterday, we had Dr. Andrew Yeo from United States and Dr. Antoine Bondaz from Paris joining us to discuss the very same topics that we will discuss here today. The recording of that session is available on the ISTP homepage. But back to today. I've asked our 2 speakers to make a short introduction, but before I give the floor, I would like to briefly introduce our speakers. Professor Nobukatsu Kanehara is the Executive Director of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and a professor at the Reitaku University, with an extensive and distinguished career. From 2012 to 2019, he served as the cabinet of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe as Assistant Chief Cabinet Secretary, and in 2013, he became the inaugural Deputy Secretary General of the National Security Secretariat, and also served as Deputy Director of the Cabinet Intelligence and Research Office. He has, during his long career, been posted to several overseas postings, including Japan's delegation to the European Union and the United Nations, and to embassies in the United States and South Korea. He graduated from the University of Tokyo and has held teaching roles at the Doshisha University and the Waseda University. So please, Nobukatsu, the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Max. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm given 5 minutes. This is a very complicated issue to speak for 5 minutes, but I'll try my best. Korean Peninsula is vital for Japan, and for 2,000 years, this is our fate. And the democratic, prosperous, and strong Korea, who is ally of the United States, that is our national interest. And this is very important. And today's South Korea is exactly that, and we have some difficulties as neighbors, but we have to strengthen ties, and we have to contribute to peace stability of the region. For Japan, the biggest issue in this region is Taiwan. China is very strong, very big today, and they don't have the ambition to conquer Taiwan if necessary, and this is the first big issue. But second big issue is North Korea, and this is the nuclear North Korea is a big headache today. North Korea, when they were born, they were studying over Beijing and Moscow. Ideologically, Mao is pure, but Moscow had money, so they went to both. But suddenly Mao betrayed. They kissed cheeks of Nixon, and Pyongyang was shocked. And they went to Moscow, and then Moscow collapsed in 1991. And they had a very difficult time. We hear that 2 million died of starvation. And this was North Korea. At that time, they decided to survive with nuclear weapons. And they turned to Japan and the United States and South Korea. We negotiated. We decided to give them nuclear power plants, but just avoid the nuclearization. Don't have weapons. You can be under watchdog of IAEA. You can be prosperous with our economic help. But they were continuing to develop nuclear bombs, and that came to surface. Americans got very angry. They scrapped the Kido project. Japan lost 40 billion yen for that because it just was in vain. And now they are determined to do that. Maybe they need that. They believe that they need that to deter South Koreans, Americans, and even Japanese and the Chinese too. And that is for them the only way of survival. And we have to somehow dissuade them from doing that. But it seems to me that's very difficult today, simply because North Korea decided to go alongside with Russia in Ukrainian war. They are sending troops there. And I hear that the Estonian border or the other borders with the Belarus or Russia, the North Korean soldiers are there. And they will be first to be killed if they have to fight. But the North Korea decided they need the Chinese help, of course. And they need Chinese shadow, but they don't like it very much. And they wanna have a breathing space. That is Moscow, but they decided to go to Moscow decisively, helping Putin. And we don't know much intelligence about that, but they must be getting technology, money, and the good weapons from Russia, not weapon technology from Russia. And that will deteriorate very much our security situation vis-a-vis North Korea. How to respond to that? Matt's question is vital, but we don't know the answer. They want to negotiate with us as a nuclear weapon state. We can't accept that. We say, well, come to the table. We prepare money for economic assistance, but just abandon nuclear weapons. They don't do that. They say, I'm a nuclear power. Just accept that. Then I can negotiate with you. And we know very well that their tactics. They know our weakness. We are democracies and we have elections. And they negotiated for that. Okay, I do that, you give me this, you do that, I do this, you give me that. And at some moment they say, bye-bye, you have elections. And this is something that we experienced for a long time. We never do this again. No more tit and tats. But how to engage them truly, it is very important, but we don't know. Our response is now going for, I believe, one direction, enhance our deterrence. What we need it for our national security, one. Two, to engage Chinese and Russians to use some influence over North Korea. They have to know that if they let North Korea do what they want, Japan, South Korea react to that. That would aggravate more the tension of the Northeast Asia. But that is something necessary that we have to do. This is where we are. That's my conclusion today. I'm happy to get any criticism, any comments upon my statement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Excellent start. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Dr. Park Won-Gon. He is a professor in the Department of North Korean Studies at Ewha Womans University, where he has served as department chair and directs the Institute of Unification Studies. His research focuses on international relations and the politics of North Korea. He holds a PhD in international relations from the Seoul National University, and previously Professor Park spent 18 years at the Korea Institute for Defense Analysis, KAIDA, including service as Director of External Cooperation, and taught international studies at the Handong Global University. He serves on policy advisory bodies and contribute analysis for Korea and international outlets. So please, Won-Gon, the microphone is yours.
All right, thank you for inviting me this very meaningful webinar. And especially this is a very timely moment that we have to talk about lots of things, including you are just mentioning that the denuclearization issue. I think that is one of the most important issue for the not only South Korean defense, but Japan and even some sense the world as a whole. So today I'm gonna briefly introduce the current situation. First, I want to talk about inter-Korean relations, and then I will talk about South Korea, North Korea, and United States relations. And probably you are well aware that South Korea, inter-Korean relations is very deteriorate right now. And 2024 December, the Kim Jong-un chairman Kim is very clearly announced publicly that they are no longer pursue any kind of reunification. Instead, they are saying that South Korea is not the same nation and South Korea is such an arch enemy. So the ultimate purpose is to reoccupy the South Korean territory if possible. And I think it's actually started this kind of position is December 2019 when they introduced so-called policy direction of frontal breakthrough line. You know that 2019 is a very important year because of the breakup the Hanoi summit in February and in last meeting between North Korea and United States in Sweden and at that October. And then North Korea has announced that they no longer pursue any kind of a meaningful exchange or dialogue with South Korea and United States unless United States first give up their so-called hostile policy toward North Korea, such as the South Korea-United States joint military exercise and the deployment of strategic assets. And at the same time, they request the United States that the U.S. and the international community should withdraw or lifting up all the sanctions that imposed to North Korea. Since then, they haven't had any kind of a meaningful dialogue with South Korea and United States. And then they are going to continue this kind of a position and attitude toward especially South Korea because they are preparing the 9th Party Congress. Probably they are going to hold this Party Congress January next year. And then they are going to maintain this kind of a policy line. And about North Korea and United States, you know that what happened lately, the Trump's visit to South Korea, and he hadn't participated the opening day of the APEC, but he mentioned a lot about the Kim Jong-un, and he even called North Korea's nuclear weapon state, and then he even considering the lifting of some of the sanction, but Kim Jong-un has never show up, and as like you remember that 2019 June, and then there is a very surprise meeting between Trump and Kim Jong-un at the Panmunjom, but didn't happen this time. And North Korea has a very clear precondition, and of course, this last September 21st, Kim Jong-un has made a very long speech, and he was explaining, he was introducing his policy toward South Korea and also his policy toward the United States. And particularly about the policy toward the United States, he has two preconditions to resume to any kind of a meaningful talk. First, of course, the withdrawal of the hostile policy, U.S. hostile policy toward North Korea, such as ROK-U.S. joint military exercise and deployment of strategic assets. And then more importantly, already Professor Kanehara mentioned that no longer have any kind of the denuclearization talk. Instead, they wanted to have some arms reduction talk, and that's what they want. And I think there is a possibility that Trump and Kim Jong-un would meet sometimes next year because and the September 21st speech by the Kim Jong-un, he said that he has maintained a good relationship with Trump, and Trump he shows his intention to meet Kim Jong-un. So probably sometimes in the first half of next year, this meeting will be held, but is totally different because between the held just to have a meeting and then have some kind of a meaningful this agreement between these two countries. I have such a huge doubt. And then about the North Korea and Russia relations, and then Professor Kanehara briefly touched upon this issue, but still it is very unclear. So of course it depends on how to end or how to cease fire Russia and Ukraine war, but the relationship between Russia and North Korea would be very different if the Russian-Ukraine war is ended. So this is my very brief introduction, and then we will continue to talk about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Park. So this sets us off in a very good direction and good speed. So let me start by picking up on two things that both of you addressed. One is the if we call it the likelihood of a Trump-Kim summit. You mentioned, Professor Park, the first half of 2026 as a possible window. And I would like to ask you if you do see that there is a possibility, and what would need to change in order to make this a reality? Because, I mean, there were some expectations during the APEC summit when Trump was in the area. He had publicly referred to that he was willing to meet. But what need to change in order to make this happen? And what kind of concessions, if I may call it that, do you think that the United States is willing to do in order to have this meeting? How important is it for Trump? So that's one. And the other aspect is something I said in my very brief introduction, that as far as I see, the geopolitical situation that has shifted since we had the summit in 2018-19 is very much in favor of North Korea. So how important is it for North Korea to re-engage with the outside world, with countries like United States and South Korea? So maybe we can talk about these two issues first. Over to you, Nobukatsu.
Yeah, thank you very much. And about the first question, President Trump is very difficult to predict.
Yes.
But one thing sure is that he wants to have Nobel Prize because Obama had it, and he's truly seeking for that. Gaza, Ukraine, and he said 8 more conflicts are stopped by him. But the one thing is North Korea is sending troops to Ukraine, aggravating the situation worse for Zelensky, and the Kim and Trump is hugging each other, and the Kim soldiers killing Ukrainians, and this is not a good picture at all. I don't think that this is an easy thing. And if Mr. Trump wants to have a deal, what is a deal? Netanyahu was almost going through the red line, and the international community was criticizing him a lot. And Trump had a card. He bombarded Iran. This is a big thing for Netanyahu. You have to pay me back. Stop fighting there. Gaza must be stopped. And the Hamas are not fully disarmed, but somehow you should stop that. And Netanyahu swallowed it. It could be done. The Zelensky's thing is more difficult. And what the purpose of this deal? Trump must say that. He says I can stop the killing, but the territory is lost, and people in territory are made Russians. Is this the goal for Trump? And he is now being criticized. And the Europeans are pushing back the 28th plan made by Kushner, but something is going on in Ukraine. Now, what's the deal in Far East? We have no war here, and the situation is worsening because of North Korean nuclear arsenal expanding. Then stop doing that, he says. Then what do you give me? What? Stop being the South Korean American military exercise. This is simply decrease the deterrence, and North Korea could be burdened to do more bad things. Lifting sanctions. Kim is expanding the nuclear arsenal, and lifting sanctions is simply contradictory. Mr. Trump is a deal maker. He's a good deal maker, but deal must have a goal, must have a purpose. I have a big question mark. What is the purpose of having a deal with North Korea today, and what to give to North Koreans? Because and they have no intention to reduce their nuclear weapons. And there's nothing to stop as a bad situation like war or killing or these things in the Far East. Then what's the purpose of having a deal? I have a big question mark here. So I don't even Trump will not do things that would be heavily criticized. So I hope he's saying to not to do that, but we don't know. He might be tempted.
Mhm. So would you say that you are a little bit pessimistic about the outlook for a potential meeting between President Trump and Kim Jong-un?
Yeah, if I'm the State Department diplomats, I say, sorry, you should not do that. But of course, he would not listen to me. But if I'm in that position, I'll say that. But Mr. Trump he's adamant. He's an old man. He's adamant, and he believed that he can make a big deal with the bad guys on earth and Putin
Okay.
and Netanyahu. He might be tempted, and nobody can stop it if he wants to do that.
Yeah. So, Professor Park, on these two issues about how likely it is and what would be the possible, incentives or concessions that Trump can offer for a potential summit meeting.
Well, okay. First, your question about why and how the important the meeting between Trump and the Kim Jong-un. You see, I agree with Professor Kanehara's argument, and definitely Trump wanna be a peacemaker, and he mentioned several times. And of course, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to have some kind of a meaningful result here in the Korean Peninsula, especially the denuclearization front. It means that it's very difficult to achieve any kind of a meaningful the political victory for the Trump in this area. But well, I think Trump definitely, he shows he shows his very active intention that he will continue to, or he will resume the talk with Kim Jong-un. And from the Kim Jong-un's side, definitely he wants to meet Trump, because I still believe that this sanction is working for the North Korea, because we can simply compare it to these sanctions period between the overall comprehensive sanction between 2016 and 2017, and before and after. I mean, before the comprehensive sanction imposed on North Korea 2016 and 2017, and there are, quite tremendous, quite, significant numbers. The money is traded between North Korea and then China, but right now, to the 2022, 2024 is 1/4, or some sense 1/5, is very decreased. So in that sense, I think sanction is still working. Of course, Russia is trying to evade the sanction and help North Korea, but this is pretty much limited, because Russia themselves has economic difficulties, and then the two countries' economy, I mean Russia and North Korea's economy, is not compatible. What North Korea wanted at this moment is market and investment, but Russia could not afford for that. So definitely, Kim Jong-un's the intention to meet Trump is to lifting up the sanction, as he demanded in 2019 Hanoi summit. And about the second question you asked, how important to North Korea to engage the outside world, I think at this moment, North Korea is pretty much different when we compare the 2018-2019 period. You probably remember that Singapore summit and Singapore agreement, there are important the agreements among between these two countries. First is normalized relationship between United States, and a better relationship between United States and North Korea. And second one is bringing some kind of a peace process on the Korean Peninsula. And then third one is denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But this time around, you know that Kim Jong-un is pursuing some kind of a new Cold War scheme. I mean, he emphasized the importance of the Russia, China, and North Korea's collaboration versus and United States, Japan, and South Korea. He intentionally bring this issue a lot, and in his speech, and we saw that in September 3rd and the Victory Day of China, and Xi Jinping, Putin, and Kim Jong-un together. That's one of the evidence, and also this October 10th and 80th anniversary of North Korea's Labor Party, that Lee Chang and Putin was at the Pyongyang at this time. So this time, North Korea is definitely one of some kind of alternative camp or alternative economic development model, not have any meaningful exchange with South Korea, United States, Japan, or the Western world. Instead, he wants to have this some kind of a meaningful economic exchange, economic relationship with China, Russia, and the so-called global South, including Vietnam and other countries. And then also in that kind of a scheme, North Korea definitely wanted to be acknowledged by de facto nuclear weapon state. So that's the difference between 2018, 2019, and now. But it does not necessarily mean that North Korea has achieved this kind of goal. Still, I don't think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to bring in like a Cold War scheme that we have experienced between 1947 to 1991, because it is impossible to the whole decoupling between United States and China.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll like to stay a little bit longer on this issue about possible re-engagement and what I would call the nuclear dilemma. I mean, there is arguments to be made that we would like to see some kind of re-engagement with North Korea. Maybe one argument would be a risk reduction in the border area, and another argument would be a kind of incremental approach to possible containment of nuclear weapons development or non-proliferation aspects of their nuclear arsenal. But at the same time, North Korea is clearly unwilling to have denuclearization as part of the agenda. Sometimes diplomats are very smart on finding wordings around these kind of challenges. So do you think there is a wording that we can find so we can talk about nuclear issues, or let's put it this way, that we can have a wording that would satisfy Pyongyang as a de facto nuclear state without using the exact phrase of, putting them on the list of nuclear weapon states. Would that be a way forward in order to kind of put that issue on the sideline and still be able to move forward on possible engagement? Any thoughts of this about the importance of words and how we phrase this? Yeah, please.
Okay, if I may, I will go first this time. And of course, already Trump has mentioned that North Korea is nuclear weapon state. And every time North Korea refused to have a denuclearization talk, and U.S. State Department or White House said that Trump has opened to the denuclearization talk without any precondition. That's their official position. But this time around, and when he came to South Korea, on way to come to South Korea, he said that he didn't mention it about the denuclearization, and he said that everything that he can talk about that. So pretty much you said that the diplomats they can have a very creative way to put this agenda into some very different settings. So that's possible. But I think more importantly that United States will have stop the ROK-US joint military exercise and also deployment of strategic asset. This coming next year, March, we have a regular, very huge joint military exercise, but know that Trump is very sensitive about this joint military exercise. He said that that is very expensive and provocative war game. And then so also our South Korean government, incumbent government, Lee Jae-myung government has also our president himself mentioned that not explicitly, but there are possibility to at least scale down about the joint military exercise. So that is one of the ways to re-engage the North Korea. So that's possibility. And our NIS, National Intelligence Service, and also expect that in the first, that's why I said the first half of the next year, there's possibility to re-engage dialogue between United States and North Korea. And our NIS, National Intelligence Service, confirmed that, and they have a very similar analysis and expectation too.
Professor Kanehara, do you think this about diplomatic creative wording would be a way forward, and would you agree with Won-Gon on this? If I may call it the risk or the option that Mr. Trump would maybe unilaterally scale down the exercises and then, at least in the long run, impacting negatively on deterrence?
I think it's very difficult even for Trump to accept that North Korea is a nuclear weapon state. But the tactics of diplomats, the goals are different. For U.S., South Korea, the nuclearization of North Korea, North Korea's goal is to be accepted as a nuclear state. But putting these two different goals on shelf, how to decrease tension now? Let's talk to each other. This kind of negotiations is possible, but for that, you should be. I mean, South Korea, I think, should be careful because North Korea will not reduce military tension. They need it to sustain their dictatorship. And two, if the U.S. is lessening their commitment, it's not easy to take it back again. The Americans, now 20% are MAGA people. They are Monroe Doctrine people. They do not want to be entangled in the foreign conflicts. And once their commitment is decreased, it's not easy to take it back. We are seeing Taiwan, not very much North Korea. So we are now enhancing our military efforts to deter Chinese. And nuclear debate has just begun. Shall we introduce, like South Korea, the American nuclear weapons to show China that the American bombs are here? So this debate is now going on. And the decreasing tension locally in the peninsula is a good thing, of course. But you have to think about the strategic consequence of that. After Trump is gone, negotiation will never go better. The only thing that we can get on the side of the West is to decrease somehow the tension a bit for some moment. But if you stop the military exercise once, it's very difficult to restart it. You need a reason to restart it. You can't restart it again. I'll do that again. And you have to engage Americans next time. Not only North Koreans, but you have to engage Americans to do the exercise again. So this I don't think this is not a very good idea, because changes are only tactical for North Korea and for the Americans. For that purpose, do we use the military exercise as a pawn of this chess? I don't think it's a good idea.
Okay,
well, if I may.
Yes, please, of course.
It's okay. Yes, I definitely agree with Professor Kanehara. The joint military exercise is very important. But at this very moment, ROK-US, the alliance is not just readjust, but I said that it's transformed. You probably hear that word of this alliance modernization. The process is just got started. In other words, the US forces in Korea no longer stayed here for the sole purpose to defend South Korea against North Korean threats. And the Javier Bernstein, the commander of USFK, mentioned publicly a couple of times that USFK's purpose is dual. And in other words, they are more focused on the Chinese threat and also Taiwan Strait crisis. So all this is a very huge implication for ROK-US military format and including joint military exercise. Right now, we are preparing for these tremendous numbers of the reinforcement troops by the United States. But I don't think the United States will continue to this kind of a joint military exercise. So it is inevitable scale down about this exercise. Instead, my argument is that we are more focused on the deterrence against North Korean nuclear threats, because conventional warfare, I can say that South Korea is far better prepared for the conventional warfare against North Korea. But since South Korea, we do not have a nuclear weapon, we have no choice but to heavily depend on the United States so-called extended deterrence. So we could not control the Trump. I don't know how he's going to do when he meet Kim Jong-un, what kind of agreement he will pursue, we don't know. But important thing is that South Korea, at least we have to be guaranteed for the extended deterrence. And then since 2 years ago, we have a so-called NCG, Nuclear Consultative Group, and try to institutionalize more enhanced extended deterrence. But we have to continue for that more advanced way to protect South Korea from the North Korean nuclear threats. If it has met, then I said that we cannot control, we cannot manage the Trump's and unpredictability.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that there is we seem to have some agreement that any talk about denuclearization is extremely challenging for now and for the foreseeable future. But what could be other potential areas that could be meaningful to discuss in possible engagement with North Korea? Are there any other important issues that you think would be of such a value that we should make efforts to kind of persuade or incentivize North Korea to come to the table to sit down and have some kind of dialogue? Is it the risk reduction in the DMZ? Is it human rights situation in North Korea? Is there any kind of important issues that apart from denuclearization that you see that could be worth the effort to re-engage North Korea? Any ideas, Professor Kanehara?
Tactical diplomats very often do this. Tactical things, symbolic ones, to reduce tension. And just beginning the talk is a big message for it all over the world. Of course, we can do that, but we have to know that they will never abandon nuclear weapons because they need it against South Korea, Japan, United States, against China. They need it. And that's only guarantee for them. They saw Gaddafi's fate. They saw Ukrainian fate.
Yeah.
Without nukes, they'll be ridiculed by big ones surrounding them. They can't control the big ones surrounding them. They put pressure upon that. So they just manipulate the big ones around North Korea. And if we reduce tension, and if we are nice to them, talking for say 6 months, 1 year, they'll be more determined that they can go in this way. Because we put heavy sanctions upon them, they suffer. They smuggle oil and coal. They need Russians. And if we smile and say we become nice to them, shall we? Are they coming to us? No, they don't come to us. They have Russians in their hands. They have China card. And if we lessen our pressure, they say this is okay. We can do that. So I don't think tactical smart diplomacy is not going well, and lifting sanctions are much worse. They will simply stay the course.
Professor Park, I mean, we hear time over time that President Lee is presenting, let's say, initiatives that I think is directed in order to pave the way for possible re-engagement with North Korea. Is there any kind of important issues that your government is pursuing that you think are worth the risk of, or giving opportunities for engagements with North Korea?
Well, you know that the current South Korean government is so-called progressive and liberal government. In that sense, they are trying their best to re-engage North Korea. That's kind of a top priority for their all this political and agenda. So since its inception, inauguration, and then South Korean government has offered several the talks, including very lately that the between this borderline, the MDL, military demarcation line, there is some kind of a confrontation between North and South Korea. So that's why South Korean military they demand North Korea to talk about this MDL issue, but North Korea hasn't responded yet, and I don't think they ever respond to this kind of dialogue. And about this, our government's initiative, and we so-called END initiative, END initiative. END stands for exchange, normalization, and denuclearization. And exchange means that, of course, between inter-Korean relations, we are totally, blocked. And so that's why South Korea wanted to have any kind of start with the exchange with North Korea. And N stands for normalization. It means that South Korea will help the many other countries who haven't had any kind of a normalized relationship with North Korea. They are going to help them. And finally, denuclearization. But that's the problematic. And END, and of course, there is no chance that North Korea would accept this kind of initiative because the denuclearization. But I still believe that South Korea and of course Japan and the United States, all the international community should not give up the denuclearization issue unless if we give up denuclearization talk and we have no choice but to only option is to military deterrence the North Korean threats. And that is, of course, bringing some already start the arms race. And then, that South Korea is public. We have more than 70% still favor to have our own nuclear armament. You probably know that South Korea definitely wanted to have the nuclear power plant submarine. And of course, Japan, they wanted to have that nuclear submarine too. So all this bring this another round of arms race in this region. So this is very complicated issue, but unfortunately, there is no chance that the matter you asked any other the agenda or other than denuclearization that we can bring in or we can re-engage North Korea. At this moment, I don't think there is any other options. Even Western countries like Sweden, and they have some kind of NGOs. They're helping North Korea for the humanitarian purpose, and also some of them are trying to have some kind of economic exchange, but without the lifting of the sanction, and also without the North Korea's consent to bringing some of the NGOs person to monitoring all this humanitarian distribution. It's impossible, but North Korean government has never, I don't think they have any intention to do that at this very moment.
I mean, if you look a little bit closer to let's say the situation for South Korea, it seems that the ambition of your government, the Lee administration, is kind of squeezed between its policy, as you said, Professor Park, of engaging North Korea, and also its outreach and importance of its defense industrial ties with Europe. And in order to achieve these kind of goals of engaging North Korea, they need some kind of at least quiet support, both from Moscow and from Beijing. So this kind of dual dilemma of not being really hard on Russia, because you need Russia to support your efforts in relations with North Korea. But on the other hand, you want to be seen as a reliable partner for European nations acquiring South Korean military hardware. So how do you assess this kind of balancing act that the administration is doing now? Do you see this as a difficult balance act? And is there any kind of shift in maybe more pro-European and less pro-Moscow? Or is it business as usual for the next, 6 to 12 months?
Well, you're right. You are quite right. It's a very complicated issue because we have to have some kind of a relationship with Russia because at this very moment, Russia and North Korea is a very close cooperation. You know that North Korea even deployed their troops to the Russian-Ukraine war. So in order to overcome this kind of difficulties and overcome or get through, or I don't know what is the right word, but we have to have at least maintain the very basic relationship with Russia. Some people argue that Russia can help to re-engage North Korea for South Korea. But personally, I do not believe for that at this moment, unless the Russian-Ukraine war over. But at the same time, you are quite right. And the North Korea is becoming like an existential threat to many European countries because they are directly participate this Russian-Ukraine war. I have visit many European cities last year, and it's all Europe. The attitude toward North Korea is pretty much changed. And before that, they are, European countries, some of the experts, and they are pretty much interested in the North Koreans, especially for the humanitarian purpose. But right now, they consider North Korea is, very kind of a threat. So we are maintaining this kind of a very good relationship with the European nation and European countries, not only for defense purpose, but this is another, field. For example, the Trump's the United States, they pushed all the allies and NATO and European countries, South Korea and Japan. So in that sense, so-called like-minded country, we have to get together to respond and Trump's unreasonable demand to our, all the allies and friendly countries. So in that sense, I still believe that the relationship with the European countries is very important for South Korea.
So how difficult would you say, Professor Kanehara, is this kind of balancing act that Seoul is now finding itself in, that balancing its relation with Moscow in order to deal with the North Korean contingency and development, if I may say so, and also its ambition to be seen as a reliable defense industrial partner in Europe?
This is wartime for Putin. It's very difficult to engage them. Prime Minister Abe was somehow entertaining relationship with Putin.
Yeah.
Prime Minister Kishida said, we cannot accept this black and white aggression. And then Russia shut the door against us. They see us as a part of the West today, fighting against Russia indirectly. That is how Moscow sees us. We are now receiving large number of cyber attacks from Moscow as enemy state, and this is a situation. And it's not easy to engage Russia now unless they finish this war. Russia needs North Korean soldiers to be spent, and North Korea is helping Russians and to get the support, the technology and money, and this is a reality. And the West is now reuniting again. Despite Mr. Trump's tariff policy, the Japanese, Koreans, and Europeans are now more and more conscious that we have to bear bigger responsibility, and we can no longer ask Americans to take the whole burden of defending the West. So in a sense, Mr. Trump has a big shockwave, and everybody's got awakened. And the result is the Sweden joined NATO, Finland joined NATO, Japan is doubling defense budgets, and we are going ahead as a bigger, stronger West, and the Russians, Chinese, and the South and the North Koreans, Iranians are somehow loosely getting it together. This is where we are. In this situation, it's very difficult to engage Moscow, and it's very difficult to engage North Korea neither. The things are going worse. And what's happening here in this region is the basic driver of arms race is China. They're expanding hugely their nuclear arsenal and conventional arsenal. We have to cope with that somehow. Americans say we can do all, and we have no NATO. And Japan is now trying our best to increase our defense budgets. And this is what's going on. Nuclear bombs are being multiplied in the Chinese arsenal. They have only 600 now. It will be soon 1,000, 1,500 to 3,000. And this is our situation today. And North Korea is the additional threat to us. But we can't keep our nuclear posture vis-a-vis North Korea. We have to adjust our nuclear posture vis-a-vis China. So things are very sad to say this, but things are going worse in our region very much.
If I may,
Yeah, please.
If I may, I have a question to Professor Kanehara, because right now the Taiwan Strait crisis is, many people are saying that it's directly related to the Korean Peninsula. And of course, 2 years ago, CSIS released reports that if something happened in Taiwan, it's directly make impact on the Korean Peninsula. So in that sense, lately your Prime Minister Takeichi Sanae, and she mentioned some, very strong word about, not the strong word. I actually agree with, not to agree, but I understand what she mentioned. But the relationship between Japan and China is getting deteriorate, and so how you manage these kind of things? It's not just Japan's the problem, because South Korea, we are also the very close ally, as a very close ally of the United States. We have to do something if something happened to the Taiwan Strait. This is not, distant, or it's not our business, and this is directly related to the Korean Peninsula. So what do you think about this whole situation?
The one good news is Chinese economy is not very bad. It's not a good time for them to start a war, and we can manage this. If US, Japan, and Korea, and Philippines, and the Australia allies are somehow united to show that we are okay, don't do that. China will not do this. One, two. If this happens, it affects everybody, not only Taiwan and Japan, the Philippines, but also South Korea. One, the huge amount of money, the dollar, euro in the stock market will withdraw. That means the currencies fall down and stock prices plummet. This happens in Seoul and Tokyo, and in Taipei and Shanghai too. And second thing is shipping will be stopped because the lawyers will refuse to give insurance to ships. That means South China Sea, East China Sea, no ships are running. So the ships going to Seoul, the ships going to Busan must go through the Tsugaru Strait. It's between Aomori and Hokkaido. You have to make a big detour. We do that. You have to do it simply because Tsushima Strait can no longer be usable in a situation of war, and then the trade will be cut with China. We lose all the investments, but the supply chains are all cut with China, and this is what's going to happen. And we have to avoid that at any cost. I hope that Xi Jinping understands that. So Korea and Japan are in the same boat. And we have agreed with the Americans that they can use our bases to defend Taiwan in 1960. That's our obligation. Korea didn't. But Korea, the Americans will ask you for sure that not the Korean army, but the Korean bases of the United States should be used for defending Taiwan. That is a request that is coming from Washington, and Beijing will be very angry. But this is something that will happen, and this war must be avoided. And North Korea and Russia will not participate in this war, Taiwan war, but they will do some diverting our attention, and they might do something very bad. At that time, if North Korea have a nuclear weapon, it's very bad. But this is some worst scenario that we have to bear in our mind.
So I think interesting that you bring this up, because I think it illustrates how interdependent both, let's say, the regional situation of the Korean Peninsula is between North and South Korea, and the issue of North Korea, re-engaging North Korea or not, and the wider regional discussion about different contingency in South China Sea, including a Taiwan contingency. But related to that is something that we have seen over the last, well, in fact, since February 2022, that because of the war in Ukraine, And because of the poor performance of the Russian armed forces in the initial phases of the war, they were in desperate need of some kind of support. And suddenly there were a nation that found itself in a kind of golden seat because their services were badly needed. And now, 3, 4 years later, North Korea has benefited from both economic, technical, and military support from Russia, and their forces are gaining some really up-to-date real-world experience. So how serious would you say that this kind of increase in conventional combat capability that the KPA is gaining from its participation in the war and its relation with Russia? How serious is that for South Korea and for the wider regional contingency that you just talked about? Professor,
Yes, definitely. That is one of the major concerns that South Korea, is worried about that, because definitely North Korea has to get some kind of experience, the real field experience, and also drone the UAV world, and they have some know-how how to deal with this one. Also, at the same time, North Korea has supplied this short-range ballistic missile like KN-23, 10, and 24, and they are using Russian-Ukraine war as their test bed, and it's getting better than as some of the reports analyzed. So overall, it's kind of a concerns for South Korea, but that's it. I mean, the real challenge for South Korean security is to by Russia giving some kind of very advanced military technology like re-entry technology for the ICBM or this nuclear power plant submarine and those kind of things. But there is no evidence that Russia has supplied those kind of advanced military technology. So far, we will see. Because still, I believe that Russia and North Korea's relationship for past several decades, their relationship is simply, I said, that marriage of convenience. And they are not trust with each other since 1947 when they preparing the Korean War between Kim Il-sung and Stalin. And since then, they have up and down. They haven't, trust with each other. So this is a very particular moment because they have a Russian-Ukraine war. So if the end of the Ukraine war, the relationship between these two countries, of course, they are trying to maintain some kind of cooperation, but still not that high, cooperate with each other. So that's why the North Korea decided to kind of better relationship with China, because for the past couple of years, the two countries, China and North Korea's relationship was quite bad. But this coming September 3rd, so for the Victory Day, they're trying to resume this kind of I said that demoralized relationship between these two countries.
So, Professor Kanehara, do you think, how serious is this, the increase, if I may say so, in combat conventional capability at the Korea People's Army for the regional military balance?
North Korea has no capabilities to fight against ROK and the United States at the same time. But if they are given the good weapons, they are emboldened to do stupid things. We saw that before, this sinking the South Korean submarines or just bombards the opposite side of the border. And they do this kind of things. And they need it to sustain their dictatorship, this tension. And they do that. So it's a bit scary. But it's not a strategic change at all. The U.S. ROK alliance are far stronger than North Korea in terms of conventional weapons, in terms of nuclear weapons. But they might do stupid things. One thing is when the Ukrainian war is over, the value of North Korea for Putin decreasing this way. And that's somehow we don't know what kind of final solution will be done between Putin and Zelensky. But if somehow good balance is done, then Putin will ask us to lift the sanctions somehow, to some extent. They wants to engage. Putin wants to engage us in the post-war situation. This is some chance for us to drive some edge between Moscow and Pyongyang. If you want to do that, you have to stop it. We can't accept that you're worsening situation in Japan and South Korea unless Japan and South Korea pay money for you. We don't do that. So
Yeah.
at that time we have to be careful and we have to be creative to drive edge between Pyongyang and Moscow. This is wartime cooperation, and this will not go in the peacetime.
Okay, thank you very much, both of you. The clock is ticking when you're having an interesting and stimulating discussion. I have one simple question that I would like to pose to both of you. Do you think or believe that we will in the next year, 2020, see a summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un? What's your crystal ball assessment, Professor Kanehara?
I don't think it will happen, but Mr. Trump is unpredictable. So I don't know.
Professor Park, what's your assessment?
Yeah, I already mentioned that there is a very strong high possibility they are going to meet because Kim Jong-un, he has his own reason to meet, and also Trump, he wanna be recognized as the peacemaker, and at least he tried.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll leave it with this, and thank you also all to our listeners that tuned in today, and please remember that spread the words that the recording will be available on ISTP homepage, maybe today or at least tomorrow. Thank you very much, Professor Kanehara and Professor Park. It was a pleasure to host you today, and all the best, and hope to see you soon somewhere. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.